Aidan, what's
Right.
up, man? Thanks for joining me. How's it going?
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It's going good. It's going good. It's getting a little bit colder out there. How's you're in Baltimore, right? What's the
Yeah.
weather like down there?
Hit or miss, hit or miss.
Anyways.
Honestly, up until a few days ago, it was absolutely stunningly beautiful weather. I was, whenever you get those periods of the year where everything's perfect, you can go outside and it's the same temperature as inside and all that. It really makes me think, like, why don't I just move to Southern California or something? But then I, really start to think, like, but do they really appreciate it the way I'm appreciating it right now? Like, probably not. I
Right.
do feel like where are you? I don't actually know where you live. Where are you tuning in
Yeah,
from?
I'm like 45 minutes south of Toronto, kind of somewhat
Awesome.
towards Niagara Falls, if you know that area. So I'm
Yes.
a little bit
Yeah.
farther north than you. I've got family down in New Jersey, so I've been all in and around DC, Baltimore, Philly, stuff like that. So
Cool.
it's not an unfamiliar area to me. But yeah, as an American, I'm always like, man, if I was an American, I think I would want to go west and south. It's just so beautiful
Yeah.
out there. But then
Well,
I
relative
have,
beauty though. It's a relative beauty thing. Like they don't get the falls changing in the seasons
yeah,
as much as we do on the east and sort of northeastern area, and that's that could be a little boring to just walk outside and see blue skies every day and nothing else. No, I don't know what I'm talking about.
no, I think
Yeah.
there's some photographer, I can't remember who it was, but he says something like, "Pray for bad weather when you have a shoot because it makes for great photos." So if I don't know if that relates to the changing of seasons, but yeah, blue
It
skies all the time, that's boring, right?
it can be for sure. I do try and encourage my couples just because it's nice to be positive and optimistic about everything related to their wedding. But I genuinely try and like explain to them that more dramatic weather generally leads to more dramatic photos or more creative
Yeah.
photos because you're just like forced to problem solve your way into getting something that looks cool. Usually that results in something you haven't done before. Hopefully, it just depends. But
Yeah, I've found, I don't know if this is like a super common thing, but like at least kind of where I am in Ontario, like shooting in March and April are very like risky months of the year in terms of weather. And usually by then, at least kind of where I live, the snow has mostly melted and it's not very pretty. And so it's
yeah,
always funny when I'll get brides that send me like pin boards of like, oh yeah, here's some inspiration. And it's
perfect
like the dead of
snowy.
summer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Or not even. It's like beautiful summer. And I'm like, you're getting married in March, right? Like I'll do what I can, but it's not really going to look like this. Like, thanks for the inspiration.
I've over the years learned to chalk that over eager couples that send inspiration boards or whatever. I chalk that up to they're excited about their photos. That's good. That's a good thing. As long as they're not too fixated on, can you recreate the shot exactly? Then I welcome it with open arms just because at least I'm not some vendor, a label-less, no-name vendor that they're checking off the list just because, it's good. But, I don't remember the last, maybe this happens more often in your neck of the woods. I don't remember literally the last time I was photographing in snow in winter weather and it was, like actually beautiful snow. It's always like a mushy, half melted, mostly rain and gray around here. It's like
Yeah.
when you actually have a couple in front of you and it's doing something, it's never that beautiful, fluffy white snow, right? Ever. Almost.
That's the stuff that fills up Pinterest and
Yeah.
Instagram. But no, I
Because
very
it's
much
so
the same.
rare.
Like,
That's why.
right. And yeah, I don't mind. I really like the snow. I don't know that it's fair to say I like winter, but I like the snow. And as a Canadian, when all my Canadian friends like to bellyache about like, oh, it's getting cold. I'm like, get over it. You've lived here your whole life. But yeah, sometimes I wish that Ontario more resembled like the Rockies and Alberta and BC. And I'm like, oh yeah, like they get a good, like it was snowing there a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, it's like October, the beginning of
Wow.
October. And
Jeez.
I have friends out there that it's like inches of snow already. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I could my wife Leanne, she's like, no, I'm not. I don't want winter that lasts that long. I'm like, but it's so beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's brutal, but I don't know. Maybe this year it's for the best. It's interesting with for whatever reason, I always steer to these directions towards COVID, but it's one thing everyone has in common right now. But I do wonder if things are going to be better or worse with people kind of being snowed in and sort of more inside, or if that's going to make the problem worse because then you're inside and the air is the same air circulating. I feel like it's kind of a coin flip as to whether or not people are just going to be around their own little bubble more, and that creates a positive result, or they're still going to go visit other people, but then they're trapped in the recirculated air that creates a larger problem. I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you try to think about all the ways that COVID has already affected the wedding industry and will continue to do so no matter where you are. I know, for me, it's my average year is very seasonal, where I'll definitely, like, I've done a New Year's Eve wedding and done like 2 days after Christmas and different things. Like, I've shot in the winter. Okay. In terms of feeling more stuck to being outside, just kind of for the safety sake of COVID and breathing in other people's air. It'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. One of the biggest things that I, as a photographer anyways, have really loved about COVID, again, not to say COVID is a good thing at all, but one of the good things I think that's come out of it is I feel like COVID, at least for some of my couples, has been kind of like the good excuse for them to scale back their wedding and make it more personal and not feel the obligation of like, oh, my parents they want all these people to come, all these guests that I don't know, or, they want a 9-tier wedding cake, like in The Wedding Singer or something. Like they can pick and choose kind of the traditions and the things that matter more to them. That for me, having a smaller guest list kind of, I don't know, in some ways it makes me feel a little less pressure all at the same, even though it doesn't really matter because the client is always just my couple. So who cares if there's 300 guests or not? But that's one thing I really like is I feel like I don't know, I'll ask you, do you feel like, I know you've done a lot of Zoom weddings recently, or maybe kind of towards the tail end of the summer. How big of a difference is the atmosphere as opposed to like if COVID had never happened and it was a full on wedding day?
The vast majority, it's a totally different atmosphere, very scaled down. The absolute priority players in someone's life, family or friend, are the only people there. Nobody, extra. And I do like that aspect. Plus, as the photographer now, I've said this all along, my photos have an instant realization of value because all those extra people who are still, friends and family, maybe not as close, but you would otherwise have had them at your wedding. You want to involve them and get them excited and celebrate you through the photography now or through the video. Like and a lot of times I think that value can be, it's a years down the line that people really start to appreciate their photos when somebody's maybe passed away or the memories start to fade. But now, again, it's like instant. It's the day you send that gallery, everyone's so much more energized to share everything. So it's sort of, it's ramped things, it's affected things in all different ways across the board. But I've had some weddings where people were just trying to pretend, though they were being cautious and wearing masks and all that, people were trying to do everything in a traditional wedding template. And they had a lot of people there and, it was fine. And it was all appropriate given the current state of things, months ago. It's interesting. I like your wedding ring. I keep seeing it. It's pretty cool. Is it made of, what is it made of?
So it's meant to resemble copper, as in just like the metal copper, but it's actually made by a company called Enso, E-N-S-O, and it's silicone. So it's literally like it's not metal at all. It's
look at that. Yeah.
Wow. It bends and is complete. Like I think at least in the beginning, they marketed it as a safety wedding band. So if you're a rock climber and worried about getting your finger stuck in a crevice or something, or like if you're a woodworker and having tools or a doctor or nurse or something, you have to wear gloves. That's probably very useful.
I don't know.
Yeah. And so it was like, I think $30, and they have a lifetime warranty where if you rip it, you just pay for shipping after a while and they'll send you a new one in the same size. But it's like, it's been fantastic. I have a legit tungsten wedding band, which is hilarious because tungsten is one of the heaviest metals you can get a wedding band made out of, as far as I know. And the silicone is like nothing. So to go from one to the other is quite funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fantastic little wedding band.
It looks good. Did you get married recently? Did you have a photographer yourself, or?
I did. Yeah, we got married 6 years ago. We were married 6.5 years. Slowly approaching 7, so that's cool. Yeah, it was funny because at the time, so my wife Leah and I got married in 2014, and at that point, our business, we operate. That's kind of a blurry line about who is our business. It's mostly me, but my wife Leanne, she'll second shoot.
Do you
with
use
me.
your name in the business, or is it like an umbrella term or phrase?
Yeah, so the name, the official name is Hush Hush Photography and Film.
I like
because
that.
we also do a bit
That's
of
new.
videos.
That's a
Thank
new
you.
collection of words that I haven't. It's nothing similar to something else I've heard. That's great.
Yeah, the name came, so 2014 we got married, but in 2011, 2012 was when we met and started dating, and we went to a small Bible college here in Ontario, and it's
Bible
like
college. What is that?
Bible.
Oh,
college,
Bible.
pardon me.
It was like bottle. College.
Pardon me.
You guys are drinking all the time, but no, opposite of that, perhaps. That's good.
So anywho, it like the full student body was like 200 people. Like we're talking like very small. And so when we started dating, like everyone kind of knew everyone's business. And so when I was convincing Leanne to like go on dates with me, I was like, hey, let's go. I'll teach you how to light paint. So we were like going out at night and using photography as our excuse to, or my excuse to kind of get her to go on these inadvertent dates with me. So when we started dating, we tried to keep it kind of quiet from the rest of the campus. So it was very hush hush between us. And so then there was a time I was trying to get us press passes into a concert, and I had to make her a fake website to get her a pass to go in the press pit with me. And so I used the name Hush Hush Photography. And so then when we decided, okay, let's actually make a business out of this and put prices on our website, we kind of stuck with the name. And so, yeah, that was.
I love that. It's got such a deep, legitimate connection to your story and your history instead of random word generator, that a lot of people actually use.
Yeah, I go back and forth. Like, if I was starting my business in 2020, would I use that name or would I just use my own name? And I go back and forth. But my name, Aidan Hennebry, I feel like if I was meeting someone in the grocery store, no one's going to be able to spell all of that flawlessly, right? So Hush Hush, I feel like is a lot easier to remember. So I've got that going for me.
It's got this resonant feature in it where it doesn't scream wedding photography. It kind of makes you think, huh? But in a good way, or I don't know, it could be bad too. Hush Hush, like, ooh, what's going on? But it just sticks out in your head.
My mother-in-law at first, she's like, is that like boudoir and like naked stuff? And I'm like, no, it's not that type of hush hush.
But you've got room to pivot if you need. It can work. No, one of the biggest things, whenever this has come up in other discussions about my path so far as a photographer, one of the early decisions I say I would have changed was using an umbrella term for my brand instead of my name, just because you never know how wide and far your business could grow, and it's so much easier to bring other associate shooters on board or do other things where it's not solely dependent on being attached to me, samhurd, because anything I do, if I'm not intimately involved in the process, it's like, what am I doing here? I'm pulling some tricks, unless obviously I am upfront about it, but it's just way harder to market someone else shooting for me if it's all under my literal name. So I think you definitely took the better direction, I believe. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons. I think, okay, am I remembering wrong here? Was there a point in time in the previous couple of years that you have started a photography agency of some kind? So explain to me, even though I am a photographer, what like what does that look like, or what is the pros of doing that, or what would lead someone down the path to be like, I think it's time that we start an agency?
Well, the motivator is too many leads that I'm consistently unavailable for personally, and I've never been super connected with my local community in terms of I'm not available. So I know 3 people that are, here are their names, and I'm on their list. Like, I don't trade leads back and forth with anybody locally. So it kills me every time this happens where, somebody discovers my work, they like it enough to fill out my contact form, like, who does that anymore? And like, they get through all these little barriers to finally reaching out just for me to not be available on their date. Just kills me. It feels like so much lost potential revenue and connections and all this stuff. I like want to take care of these people who found something within my brand and my work that they like, and being unable to do that enough times over time just motivated me to want to do that. But I will say it was called the Legacy Lab, and there's still plans for it. But at the end of the day, I was starting to feel a little too much like a manager, and I just don't want to manage I want to be able to have a team that I can just say, you take this, go, run, be free, and then literally never have to think about it again. And that isn't the reality of running a lot of those kinds of things. So I worked it into basically just making it a Patreon tier to do whoever's on that tier gets the leads, and then they book them if they book them under their own business, or they don't, and I don't have to think about it, and that's the end of it. And that's worked out a lot better for me in my personal, with my priorities in life. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, you touched on an interesting thing there. Outside of wedding photography, I've dabbled in graphic design over the years, and one of my favorite graphic designers, his name is Aaron Draplin, Draplin. Just a really cool guy. He's from Portland, Oregon, or he lives in Portland, Oregon. Super down to earth, he just does really interesting stuff. Very no BS, straight talker, just like a stand-up guy. Anyways.
Cool.
He, like most graphic designers, like the career path is kind of like, eventually you start an agency, I don't know if it's just like this, I don't know where this mentality comes from, that to get bigger, you have to hire people, and you have to, exactly kind of like what you're saying, like you have to manage people. And basically what he found is I have no clue how much money the guy makes a year, and it's not even about that for him at all, which is one of my favorite things about it, because a lot of people will ask him like, hey, like, you're leaving a lot of money on the table by not hiring staff and doing this and working with Nike or Apple or whatever. And one of his big philosophies is kind of he did like a whole lecture circuit, making it in the little leagues or something along those lines. Where he at some point in his career realized that hiring people and running an agency, he would be doing less graphic design work, and he's doing more managing and less of the fun stuff. That was the reason he actually got into it, right? And so I think that, that's interesting. I think just to hear you say that what you were kind of starting to do there felt more like managing and less like taking photos, which is what you love to do and what you're known for, right?
Yeah, it's a totally different skill set as well. One that some people that may start as graphic designers would even actually be better at managing and doing all the business aspects of that. But my new MacBook is here. I might need to go make sure I'm going to go make sure I don't have to sign for this and re-up my espresso. Do you mind real quick? I'm going to go grab that. Maybe we can do an on-air unboxing. It's the M1 Silicon.
Oh, yeah. I was just reading about it.
All right. Be right back. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'm glad I went, because not every person, even if they like requires a signature, we live in a neighborhood, we usually have the same delivery person. Sometimes they'll just leave it, but this is like, I don't know if this is a thing in Canada, but especially with FedEx, apparently a lot of their delivery people are just like freelancers that go rent like a Penske or an Enterprise or an Avis truck, and then they just pick up packages and go drop them off. They're not official employees.
I literally, right around the corner from my house, have an Amazon Prime shipping facility where people do that, where it was so bizarre because for weeks and weeks, we were seeing all these cars like at 7 a.m. Like our street would be crazy.
Oh, wow.
And we were like, what are all these people doing? And so eventually I was walking my dog the one day and I saw like a Honda Civic just piled to the roof with Amazon Prime packages. I'm like, now it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sure it's easy side money. Can I just say, I don't know how into Apple you are, but I have noticed an actual decline in the outer packaging experience of their products with the new iPhones.
Okay.
And just, like the cardboard, when you would take a MacBook Pro, up until literally this year, this is the first time, when you would take it out of the cardboard, it would be basically like wedged in a way that you didn't have all these little extra bits that would just fly out. Like clearly it's just as secure, but the simple process of taking it out was not as fun. Same with the newer iPhones when they shipped. I noticed taking them out of the outer packaging was, first of all, there wasn't like a nice strip that you could pull and just a little tab and just pull. It was like a messier experience. It felt, I don't know, Apple's starting to cut corners.
I mean, it's all under the guise of being eco-friendly, right? Isn't that like why they don't include chargers and things now? But then,
who knows?
Yeah.
It's one of those things you kind of have to take them at their word. I predicted for a while that similar again with COVID, it's going to be sort of an excuse, a catch-all excuse for things either being delayed or not quite as on par. I think similarly environmental things can be written off of, well, we don't do it quite that way because it'd be wasteful. It's like, is that actually true or not? Like, it might be, but anyway, I'm going to open this MacBook and see here.
Do it. It's an exciting
Still
day.
Smells as good as ever. Yeah. So I'm actually nervous, not to totally derail. We were on a good roll there, but I'm nervous about these new MacBooks only because I have a interesting sort of workflow between my laptop and my desktop that I use a feature called target disk mode, which essentially allows you to boot your laptop or any computer up as a like an external hard drive. So you plug it in this target disk mode and you can connect it over USB-C. I knew Nathan was wrong. You can connect it over USB-C and it will literally, to any other computer you connect it to, show up as if it's like a portable SSD drive or something. And so that's fantastic. I have my Lightroom catalog on here, a bunch of like critical stuff that I know that I need when I'm on the road or what have you. And I can, without having to copy stuff back and forth, boot it through my iMac when I'm at home and then disconnect it, boot this computer up like normal. And it's all good. But because of the new Silicon and some of the new OS things they've implemented, target disk mode is gone. Now they only have something called sharing mode, which I think makes it show up accessible, but as like a network connected drive, which can have some unanticipated consequences, like where some apps don't support network connected. I don't know if Lightroom still does, but they used to, for example, if you had your Lightroom catalog saved on a network drive, you wouldn't be able to open it. It had to be saved locally. And it was like just infinitely frustrating. Yeah,
that's an interesting thing. I'm sure in time it'll get better, but I even still feel this way with USB-C. Like I'm running a 2016 MacBook Pro.
Oh, okay.
Just dongle city, like adapters everywhere for everything. And on some level, I'm just like, I am numb to it because it's just the way it is. But I remember at the time I was buying it, like, USB-C is the way of the future. And now I'm like looking at slowly replacing this laptop and I'm like, it still doesn't feel that way.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call it. I am convinced that something related to manufacturing, probably due to COVID, has prevented these companies from being able to ship with charged batteries. Every camera I purchased this year, nearly every camera, and now the freaking laptop does not come with a pre-charged battery, has not come with a pre-charged battery, including this MacBook Pro, which is, again, not Apple-esque. Steve Jobs literally spearhead. Apple was the first company to prioritize figuring out a way in manufacturing to enable products to come partially charged so you wouldn't have to immediately plug it in. Apple was the first company to do that, and then it became like industry standard. And now what the crap? I'm not
That's
that
so
bad,
bizarre.
but it is kind of weird. I just want to know
why.
Well,
it's all those like little, almost, I don't know, unspeakables that kind of make you appreciate a brand like Apple. Cause you definitely, I mean, at the time I was buying this 2016 MacBook Pro anyways. But the month before I bought this, I was running a MacBook Pro for a couple years before that. But at the time I was upgrading, I'd switched over to a Dell. I think it was an XPS 15. And on paper,
I remember those.
all of the specs, everything about the Dell should have been better. And ordered it on Black Friday, and it finally arrived. And within the 30-day return window, there was 2 separate times that I broke down angry, crying. I was so mad that I actually cried. And I'm like, maybe I cry more than most men. I don't know if that's just a generalization, but I'm like, this thing had me really angry to cry, not once but twice. That Leanne was like, we're taking it back and we're just buying you the Mac. I don't care if it's more money. And that, to me, that was like a lesson learned in the Mac, at least for me, always just worked straight out of the gate. It wasn't like arguing with screen calibration and inconsistency between apps and things like that. And I mean, some of that is starting to creep in now, but
100%
for
it
them,
is, yes.
but at least at the time, more than the PC, the Mac just worked for me. But you're very much paying for the name in some ways.
Yeah, but I do think Apple did a good job of opening up people's brains or minds to the consideration, the realization, the truth that whatever specs exist on paper that do not translate to what it's actually like to use the product. Because that is why Apple got so much hate for so long from people in the PC world and all that. On paper, they would consistently fall short. Although the tide is turning now, Apple is starting to pull way ahead with their own custom silicon and all these other things. But for the longest time, I think it took Apple becoming incredibly successful for people to finally sort of let it sink in that it is about more than just pure stats. It is about how well integrated things are vertically. Just as Siri starts talking to me out of nowhere, Siri is a big pain point in Apple. It's like, are you kidding me? Anyway, but I do feel like now, if you think about that in other products, cameras, other electronic products especially, people are more open to the realization that, oh, maybe this is the best camera for me, even though it's not the best on paper or the most expensive. Something else about the experience actually makes it a superior overall output in my creative endeavors. That was why I switched to Apple. I was, in college learning on Linux and of course Windows PCs most of the time. And I bought a Mac because my first job out of college bought it for me. They said, yeah, go on. And it seemed like you said, the screen quality was maybe a little bit better, or just I'd have to worry about it a little bit less. And I started to realize like it removed enough of these small pain points, these little frictional things. And those add up to being a lot more headroom for me to concentrate on the fun, creative aspects of photography and what I was doing creatively, that Apple was the superior choice. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I know what you mean, man. Those little things add up very quickly.
What were we talking about just before I derailed us entirely by going to get my package?
That's okay.
Yeah. Your wedding. Did you have a photographer?
On COVID?
Did you have your photographer at your wedding? Were you like?
I did. Yeah. They're now kind of my friends, or not kind of my friends. They are my friends. Their names are Jimmy and Sonia Bender, Green Autumn Photography and Film. Cool. And at the time I'd been following them for a couple of years at that point. That when we got engaged, we were planning to get married. It was like automatic, like, oh yeah, this is who we're hiring, no doubt.
Nice.
And then it's been cool since then. So I was in 2014. Was our wedding day. Since then, I've kind of just rubbed shoulders and become friends with other local photographers. So I think we've had 5 different photographers capture our family and our life over the years. I have 2 kids, Leo and Betty, 2.5-year-old and a 10-month-old. So
my gosh,
both very young. Yeah, they're the best, man. Next to being a husband, being a dad, greatest honor of my life, without a doubt. Beautiful. Photography could go away, just everything else. Anyways. Yeah, so we try to do family photos at least kind of once a year, usually at least once a year. And it's kind of just been very organic that every time it's rolled around that we're like, oh yeah, we should probably do some more family photos, that we've usually like, oh, we made a new friend, or like, oh yeah, we've been waiting to hire this person. So that's been really fascinating, I think, to see how other photographers operate. One of the, like, within the umbrella of Hush Hush, I also do videography. And so
Oh, wow.
being a videographer on a wedding day and watching another photographer, it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like I feel a little bit like a secret agent, where I'm like, usually I'm the one doing your job. And so I just, like, in my mind, just very critically, like, okay, what are the good things they're doing? What are the little tricks I can add to my bag? And what are the things that I hate that they're doing that I never want to do? Or just like, what scenarios do they get into? How do they work out of this and that? So for me, even though it was funny that we just spent a lot of time talking about computer gear, but the creative decision-making has always been the part of following other photographers and other creative people in general that has always appealed to me. And that's definitely one of my favorite reasons just to be one of your patrons, is that you don't just, like, it's like every YouTuber is like, oh, check out this brand new camera, and that's all like every photography YouTube channel eventually just devolves into
it does. I know. I've tried to stop myself from falling into that trap so many times, just reviewing something for the sake of it existing and not actually having used it extensively myself or believing in it as much as maybe I should. But reviews really sell. People love hearing other people's opinions, but I don't know. And the other thing with YouTube is that, and I know I've said this many times before, it tends to be a lot of really excellent YouTube video makers if you actually hire them as a photographer, as the output you want from them, they consistently fall short. Like, their actual photography is not very good, but their ability to make a fantastic video specifically on the YouTube platform is what they're best at. And that's a fundamentally different thing than what everybody watching these videos is trying to get and tease out and get a sense of in their insight. It's like a weird, and I don't know how to fight that or whatever, other than to just say it like I did. But yeah.
No, I completely agree with you. Just, like, as a disclaimer, I recognize I am Joe Nobody to anyone. So if anyone listening to this is like, who is this guy to be bashing YouTubers?
Oh,
I'm in no way
fine.
trying to say I'm better than anyone. But I like, there's a lot of guys that I know locally that are very successful on YouTube and different business endeavors. And a lot of those guys, I at least feel like, me as a fellow photographer, the way that I see their work, I'm like, I feel like there's a lot of things that, I don't know if it's necessarily trendy or just, I don't know, like, I feel like it's an interesting tension, maybe, is kind of the best way to look at it, between, like, being incredibly good at your craft or being a good business person. And I think it's almost like bands trying to become successful in the music industry. Like, I've seen really, really phenomenal bands that deserved to be massive that died out because the marketing, they just couldn't get the attention. Yeah. And kind of the same thing with photography, that exactly like what you're saying. Some of these photographers, you're like, okay, they know how to talk to an audience. They know how to make here's 5 things that every newbie should be doing. Like, they can do that stuff really well. But the actual, like, if you're analyzing the content of their work, and I mean, just to be clear, anyone could say this about me too. I'm not claiming to be an amazing photographer at all, but I care about that stuff, and I'm looking at it like the content of what they're putting out. I try to look beyond just like the surface level presentation of a really fancy YouTube channel or how many followers they have on whatever social media platform that month,
Sure. Yeah, and I agree. There are certainly people that do both, or do a lot of various aspects of their creative output incredibly well. Like, those people do exist, and oh my gosh, very envious. But yeah, it is very similar to, I think, the the musician example that you laid out. And I think more people could probably relate to that, because I would guess most people grew up knowing somebody like really immensely talented at a musical instrument, just like naturally mind-blowingly gifted, and now they're like an accountant or whatever. Like they just didn't the track didn't follow through, or they just wanted to keep it as a not a profession and more of a hobby, and that's it. There's a lot of different paths everyone can take, and some people that are immensely untalented, especially in the musical world, become insanely successful, and you're just like, oh, this is all one big marketing thing. How are all these lemmings into this song? This is the worst song ever. Like, the most popular songs are generally just so bad. But anyway, it's that's been a longstanding issue for me, because I am sort of like strangely naive when it comes to pop music in general.
Okay.
More often than not, anybody has a song on, and I can recognize it as like it's popular, but I know absolutely nothing about who the person is. I didn't really even confidently know who Prince was until like a couple years ago. Like I know. And so, but being at more and more weddings over the years, 400 or so now, I've gotten a clear handle on like the most popular songs that most people like know together in a group and like to dance to. And I had to push back against that, because I just found it so frustratingly uninspiring to hear the same stuff every weekend. I just listen to my own music now during receptions, and I have for a long time. I just can't handle it.
Yeah, that's a clever thing. One of the fun things about being a videographer sometimes is that when I actually get to shoot with photographers that I know and I'm friends with and I like their work, I like, yeah, then you're kind of just like hanging out with your buddy all day. I don't really hire second shooters, so I don't have that experience outside of just like, oh, we happen to be shooting the same wedding. But I would always like be making bets like, okay, what song is the DJ going to open the dance with? And we'd always take bets, or like, okay, what song is she walking down the aisle to? And there was like Twilight was really big for a while, and
Game
then
of
Ed
Thrones.
Sheeran was really big.
Game of Thrones,
yeah,
for the entrance. Yeah, that had a little phase, which I was actually into. That was fine. But
that's
I never finished.
It's fun to make bets on those things when you're working with someone that you're buddies with. Like, okay, I think it's this. Like, yeah, it was Black Eyed Peas was one of the dance floor openers. Or
now I see some instruments behind you. Are those the family's? Are those yours? Do you play anything yourself?
These are mine. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So this is actually just what's stuffed up into my office. So that is a bass guitar that I've had since I was 12. So 15 years.
Nice.
And this is a ukulele, and I'm not even really that good at ukulele. It's just like the fun thing to take to the cottage. But my main instrument is an acoustic guitar. I have a Taylor, 316 mahogany something or other. I don't know. It's fancy. But it was before we had kids. I had a couple of very talented musician friends, guitar player guys. And just before I had kids, they had one of my good friends had bought this really expensive guitar, and he's like, oh man, you gotta like do it before you have kids, because after that you'll never have the money to buy a nice guitar. So I did that. So at one point I owned, I think, 8 different guitars, all like sub $500, like nothing fancy. Yeah. But I was able to sell a bunch of them, and then talk my wife into being like, okay, this is like the one. And so I bought that. And that's music was my first love. When I was in like grade 6, I distinctly remember like my parents being like, all right, Aidan, so like, you know, what do you have any dreams of what you might want to do one day? And I was like, musician, definitely. And they're like, maybe it would be good to have a fallback.
Major in computer science, but keep that music going. Yeah.
And so my parents, they were great in terms of like, they were always trying to steer me towards, something like a 14-year-old can't understand, which is like, keep doing the thing you're passionate about, but like also do something in case that doesn't work out. And so eventually like that part caught up with me, but my parents were, they were pretty patient in being like, you'll come around. So,
yeah.
And I mean, now the joke is that I do photography for a living anyways. So I don't know who won ultimately. But
It's funny how often people like literally just happen. The person delivering my package, she's like, "Oh, I love your house. What do you do for work?" I'm like, "I'm a photographer." She's like, I just see the disconnect in the brain. Like, how are you doing something creative again? What's going on? Photographer's still a thing? Wedding photographer, I'm convinced, is the only one that actually pays.
I've
had a few conversations with Joe McNally where just off the cuff, like random comments where he's like, yeah, that's the one that pays. And it's not even a discussion, but he said it often enough. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is the only one that actually makes people money. Unless again, you're like big into reviews or YouTube or selling the dream of photography without actually being one. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've hopefully none of my clients are listening to this, but I have just like had such a serious love-hate with wedding photography for almost my entire career, maybe until about a year and a half ago is kind of maybe when I finally maybe turned the corner. I think I've turned the corner.
You've turned the corner. Just like, you didn't love it from the beginning? Wait, this is specifically weddings? Is that what you're...
Specifically weddings. Always love photography. That's the easy part. But more just like, I always just felt like there was a sense of monotony about it that was exhausting. But then also just like, I don't know. I was at the point definitely where I was like, you see the guys on YouTube who are, oh yeah, I just shot this commercial with Nike. And I'm like, oh yeah, wouldn't that be so cool? I wouldn't have to shoot weddings. I also, for better or worse, I still get fairly nervous just before every wedding day, like no matter what, like the hour before at like 10 a.m. I'm trying to scarf down my lunch and I'm like, okay, if I can't think about what I have to do later or else I'm going to lose my appetite and won't be hungry. But I try to put a lot of pressure on myself to just like every day, every time I show up at a wedding, be like, let's make this the best one yet. And like, let's knock it out of the park. Let's like every day I want to be like on top of my game. I don't want to be like, oh man, like I really just kind of coasted through that. So I think that I add stress to myself unnecessarily. And so I think over the years, I was like, oh yeah, getting out of weddings, like, oh, it would be easier to do something other than weddings. And so there was a point in time I was like, okay, commercial filmmaking, like working for just like companies in Toronto, just like corporate things, you know? But I met this director of photography, filmmaker guy locally in Hamilton here, just at like a meet and greet thing pre-COVID last year. And he was someone I'd kind of known through the internet. And so I was pumped to meet him. I'm like, okay, I'm going to say hi to this guy and just tell him he's a cool dude. And so when he's like, yeah, what do you do? I'm like, yeah, I'm a wedding photographer. And he's like, oh man, I miss those days. It was so easy. And me hearing that, I was like, it is, because I want what you're doing. And so that was also like a little bit of a red flag. Like, okay, maybe weddings aren't that bad.
There's trade-offs that get filtered out. Every bad thing gets filtered out through what is put through social media, blogs, the internet, whatever. When all you see is the end result, it does seem so much easier than it is in anything that is done. And you have to be in love with the process, not the end result. And if you can tap into that with weddings and get over some of the similar templates that people follow, again, sort of a benefit of what's happening this year, that's been upended. It's infinitely more interesting to show up and document with weddings now because all weddings are different. But yeah, if you can tap into the falling in love with the process and not just being obsessed with the final output, that's important too. But I think the priority needs to be that process. And yeah, how long have you been shooting then? I don't know. You said 2014, 15, I think.
Yeah. So, I picked up a camera in high school. It was yearbook class. So it was kind of like the design and photography combination there that kind of got me hooked on it. So that would have been like 2010 would have been the first time I ever picked up a camera.
Do you know,
and then bought.
Just not to interrupt, but I know I'm going to forget if I don't ask right now. Do you know if yearbooks are still a thing? Do they still make those for students, or is it all kind of digitized and forgotten about?
I would have to think that it's still a thing.
Okay,
I would think so.
I hope so, but I could see it going away eventually.
It's interesting to see my old high school, like they have a Facebook page now, or like,
Yeah.
the students run a Facebook page for like the art class or something.
Okay.
And I'm like, I remember when I was in high school at that point, which realistically wasn't that long ago. They like using Facebook was like not allowed on campus. Like it was a fascinating thing that I think definitely schools are more online and more plugged into social media than before, but I would hope so. I mean, especially you as a wedding photographer, I'm sure you would agree that printed content of any kind has a value that digital doesn't. There's pros and cons to both, of course.
I just haven't been around enough kids that grew up with devices. I mean, I got my first iPhone in college, so I was of course plugged into the internet and everything since middle school. But these kids now, I sound so old, have grown up with literal social media since they were in elementary school. Probably fourth and fifth graders now are graduating and in college that grew up with social media. So I could just see the allure, the appeal, or even the understanding of like, what do we do with this book now? Be actually lost on people past at a certain point. It's like, wait, so you just look at the pages of photos? I don't know. I think that's going to happen someday. I really do. I hope not, but I mean, I know the value, but eventually, it may not be there. Anyway, I totally derailed you. I love that you had a background, or at least started somewhat on yearbook. You were doing photography attached to your responsibilities with yearbook, or something else?
Yeah, so the way our high school did it was yearbook was a class that you took. At one point it was a volunteer thing, but then everyone quit because it was a lot of friggin' work, and then it fell to one kid, and then the teacher just eventually was like, if we make this a course and they get a credit for it, more kids will do it. So that was when I started falling in love with it, and I bought my first camera. I had an Olympus E 500, something like that, 50 something. I don't know. It was like a little DSLR. I think my dad still has it at home in a box somewhere. But that was a good camera. Then my first camera after that, towards the tail end of high school, was the D7000, the Nikon D7000.
Yeah.
So that was fun. And then, so anywho, fast forwarding a bit. So all throughout college, so I'd have been 2012 to 14, I was doing photography, kind of just always on the side, like only a couple weddings a year. And I've never ever been a high volume wedding photographer by any means. Never, like, I don't think I've ever shot more than 20 in a year, which is absurd to some people, but to me, it's like a nice balance. So even when I quit my job,
totally reasonable. I think 20, 25 is the sweet spot where you can totally do it. Like you can live off that just fine, depending on exactly what your average booking rate is and your cost of living wherever you live. But that's fine. Any less than that, and it's a little scary. If you only had 10 or 12 weddings in a year, I don't know who could live off of that anywhere. But again, a lot of outside factors go into that.
Yeah, it's and COVID has even affected all of that in a really interesting way. Sure. But for me, I've got buddies that just a real quick, 2016 was when Hush Hush officially, I quit my job and went full time with that. And so I've been doing that ever since. But I've got buddies that, some of them will shoot like 40 or 45 weddings or 50 weddings in a year. And I don't think that's unheard of. But I always like, how do you survive that? And they're like, it's a lot. And I think part of it comes down to, and I mean, it'd be interesting kind of to hear your thoughts on this, or what you do under your photography business, is like the level of kind of availability and connectedness to each one of your couples. If you like, for me, shooting an average of 20 a year, it allows me to like be reachable by email or to answer questions that to me might be kind of silly or repetitive, but things that someone planning their wedding for the first time, they don't know. Right. But I found that guys that shoot 40 or 50, it's kind of like, okay, fill out this itinerary form and I'll see you on Saturday. And to me, the aspect of like building a personal relationship as much as I can with the client has always been a very direct connection to the ease and the flow of a wedding day. But yeah, what is like an average year for you, and how do you handle the client photographer relationship?
That's great. Also, before I forget, I like how we have the same little color cables here coming out of our microphones. Although I do wish I had the spring coiled spiral. Yeah, I do shoot about, on average, over 40 weddings in a year, up to, I think the most I ever did was like 52 or something. And what I found, again, this is sort of just feeling it out, anecdotal, not hard evidence. I don't send out surveys at the end of the year to get feedback, although you should do that. I don't. What I found is that timeliness, response time, matters more than anything else. It almost doesn't even matter what you say sometimes, as long as you get back to them in a freakishly fast amount of time, which I've always been really, really good at leading up to the wedding. After that, when it's like the editing phase, I'm pretty quick about turning around some sneak peeks. And then after that, it's like you're going to wait a month before you get your gallery. There's just nothing else I'm going to be focusing on. And I'm going to take a couple days to get back to you because I have other clients that have priority right now. But yeah, leading up to the wedding day, engagement session, all that, I have canned responses, out the butt about, or I don't know, I probably a better phrase I should come up with.
Wazoo.
The wazoo. That address almost anything, because you're right, it is a lot of repetitive aspects. A lot of questioning that go into a wedding day that the same people have in slightly different variations, but it's like the same thing. So you can have a dozen canned responses that, I typed up and just sort of saved once I realized, oh, I've answered this the same in a slightly different way 4 times already. I'm going to save this, label it in big bold, and I can have it to lean back on. So, and then replying with that super quickly, people tend to, the questions subside. And I do meet with people as many times as they want over the phone. I try and not have like an endless stream of email threads where things get lost and it's one sentence replies to things. Like, get me on the phone if it's a meaningful, deep series of questions. Otherwise, like, I am all in on the wedding day. Like, you are my sole focus. When boots on the ground, I'm right next to you, wedding day, engagement session, what have you. And then outside of that, again, I take a step back for the actual editing process. So it's all about striking that balance. But that's also unique to me, not having kids right now. If I would have a very different answer, I'm sure. Maybe even go as far as to say I would outsource some of what I do, either in editing or album design, which I have done with album design to some degree. All those things, like, you may want to even outsource it once you have a couple kids, stuff like that. Like, the answer is going to be different for everyone. I do think there's a way to balance it if you've got everything kind of operating at maximum efficiency, in terms of not needing 20 hours to edit a full wedding gallery. Like, some photographers are in that situation where they literally need like 20, 24 hours spread out over multiple weeks to edit in a consistent manner where they're really, really happy. I don't need that. I'm very happy with my output. I'm very happy with my consistency. All my clients are, and I've got it down to, hours. And so just really pushing yourself to get those systems in place, your process for booking somebody and sending out contracts and keeping up with invoices, like, all of that is done sort of in an automated way. It frees up a lot of time to be able to handle those 40, 45 weddings. Give it your all on the wedding day. Give it incredibly fast response times leading up to that. And anyway, so I've kind of answered everything all over the map, but but it did kind of loop me back into something we were getting into earlier, which I forgot about before I got my MacBook, which was the sense that you need to expand your business with actual people and humans and employees. I think a lot of what is happening now, enabled by the internet and just endless new iterations and evolutions of apps and software being designed, is that you can do a shocking amount completely I'm not going to say the phrase. It's the word solo and entrepreneur combined, but I freaking hate it. It's just a buzzy word that I'm just, I hate buzzy words.
Dialoguing as a verb is one I hate. Let's dialogue together. Like, don't say that. Let's talk.
But being an entrepreneur, running a business completely by yourself, I think it's shocking how much you can do completely on your own. And you should just work that model, I believe, to death, and until you have no other choice but to outsource it, because you're just dying under the stress, or you have a life-changing moment like a child now that's going to totally disrupt every aspect of your life, I'm sure. which I would let you speak to more if you have any insights to that. But.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, I don't know if this is going to matter to most, like I've always never had a studio where I worked out of. I'm like, that's a lot of overhead that I do not need to pay. And again, as kind of a, like the Aaron Draplin, like making it in the little leagues, like just being kind of a little league photographer. I'm like, I don't want the finances and the headache that come with the studio. So working out of my home before we moved to this place, and I'm in my home office right now, which is a luxury and something I'm very thankful for.
It looks very cozy. I like that. Is that a real typewriter?
Thanks. Heck yeah, I've got a couple.
Oh.
I'm a big typewriter guy. This is
interesting hobby.
This is my tuxedo, my black and white.
Okay.
I cried once again. Cried all the time when my wife gave me that one.
Aww.
That was a surprise. But anywho, what was I talking about? Having space and kids. That's right. The biggest thing that I found was separating kind of work in life when we had kids, and just before that. When I was working a day job just outside of Toronto, it's easy to be like, when I'm in Toronto, I'm in work mode, and when I'm home, I'm in home mode. But when you work out of your home, like my home office was in the living room for a little bit while, and literally in the living room when my wife was on maternity leave, shout out Canada, and we had a kid. That was really difficult to be like trying to work when literally I turn my head 90 degrees and they're just there hanging out like, hey, come cuddle with us. Let's watch a movie or something like that. So when we moved into this house, having a separate space for work has just been a lifesaver, and definitely my biggest piece of advice to anyone that is starting their own business from home as a one-man band. Like, have a separate space for working that's different from where you just live your life, because creating healthy boundaries between like how much you want to work in a day or in a week or in a month. Like that was one of the, among many motivators to quit my day job in Toronto, wanting to just have more flexibility to choose my hours. Like I hated, I was waking up at 5 a.m. and I was in the office by 6 just to beat the traffic. And then I would leave at 3 and hit traffic on the way home. Like it was a nightmare for 2 years. My mental health was just awful for a while. But
I can imagine.
And I got 2 weeks of vacation a year, and that was it. And I'm like, that's such a miserably small amount that now, like being self-employed and having done it for a couple of years, I definitely have a better understanding of like, okay, I always joke with my father-in-law, who's an accountant who works 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, every day of his life. That I get 52 weeks of vacation a year. Cause like, oh yeah, you're a wedding photographer. You only work on Saturdays, right? So anyways, having that having that distinction of like work time and home time was something that initially was one of the reasons I was quitting my day job, but it's almost one of the things I've adopted back into my life. Not in the same way, but very much as just like a healthy thing to avoid burnout and to avoid hating my job. And that probably also plays into back when I was talking about turning the corner, about realizing, okay, weddings aren't that bad. That it really, when I really clued into all the benefits that weddings give me, I realized it fits really nicely into my life, like seasonal work. So in the winters, I'm not working very hard. It lucked out. It was lucky the way that we had our kids in the winter. So I always had a couple weeks or months to like adjust to having a new kid before I had to go out and be working again.
That makes sense.
It just like, as you were talking about editing and trying to get that process like streamlined, like now, editing like photo wedding, I never turn a wedding around less than 1 month from the day of the wedding, because I found that in my experience, if you do it too quickly, almost some of the magic is missing, where like you don't have the anticipation. Like it's one of the great things I think about Christmas. I love Christmas, is that the whole month in December, you have all this anticipation about what am I getting or who am I seeing, and all these things that almost like I feel like turning around a wedding specifically. too fast. The memory's almost too fresh in their minds that they'll be like, oh, you didn't capture this thing, or oh, you missed this moment. That I almost feel like 1 month is like the beauty distance to be like
100% agree. Yes. Even if I am able to turn a wedding around fast and I have it ready like a week or two after, I will hold off until I'm even later than I'm supposed to deliver sometimes, just to build that anticipation and excitement. You're right. And honestly, I've heard this feedback from couples all the time. Like, hey, we're just checking in. No rush whatsoever. We don't want you to rush anything because we don't want anything crappy. I mean, not those literal words, but that's like the implied, like, take your time with the edit. People actually do want that, assuming you've given them like a photo to get excited about and they're not freaking out that you lost like their images or something. Yeah, you're right. It does. It's exciting. It's like going on vacation. It's a lot of times the fantasizing about what it's going to be like is more exciting than actually going. I would say quite often that's the reality.
And I think it all like kind of sets you up to be in love with your photos, specifically for wedding photos, right? That, it how do I say it? Like you're already inclined to love your photos if you are, especially if you've seen a couple of teasers and you're just anticipating this really, really incredible product, right? And so I think kind of what you were saying before, going back to the client experience, like quick turn emails and things like that, all of that leading towards this overall positive experience for your clients that then when you do deliver that gallery. And one of the things too, for me, I always like, it's in my contract and I tell all my couples during their consultations and things like that, like expect that it'll take a maximum of 3 months to get your photos back. And so kind of like under promising and over delivering, that trying to set it that far away. And then when it's been 1 month, like literally today, I returned a wedding, and like, you can kind of like, I don't advocate lying to your clients, but like, I was so excited that I just pumped this out. I just couldn't wait. I had to get working on it right away. That I think also just makes your client feel really valued and cared for, like they are special to you. And I mean, I don't say that to a client that I didn't like working with. I'll just be like, hey, here's your photos. Thanks again for hiring me, giving me
Nice.
your money. But yeah, besides that, I think doing what I can in every other way unrelated to the photos themselves, trying to build a really, really positive experience at every checkpoint is super important. I just read, I think it was a Patreon post you made about having the 3 automated emails about the status of the wedding after you shoot. I think that's brilliant.
Thank you.
I think that's so smart. That
I was worried that it was going to be just lost on. I think it is hard to explain, and I'm so bad. I'm really good at coming up with like an idea, but then like boiling it down to this is why it's actually going to help you. I'm so bad at getting that across. But okay, so my post made sense to you. Please elaborate.
Yeah, man. I immediately went to like, okay, how can I implement that? And so I'm like, I need to get better at automating emails and things like that anyways. But one of the other ideas that I kind of borrowed from you and kind of took it in a slightly different direction is kind of the idea of a client page. So correct me if I'm wrong. All of the clients that hire you, they can go to samhurdphotography.com and log in and have like their contract and their wedding photos and stuff there. And you even record a small message for some couples just saying, hey,
I'm back and forth on it's enough friction that I tend to fall behind and then catch up and then fall behind again and catch up. But it ebbs and flows. I don't always do the personalized like welcome video. I do have like a generic one that I send in place of that.
That still counts. But just the idea of having a client page is something that I've done, that all of my clients. And I think like I don't barf, but I'm still stuck on SmugMug, and I'm like finally about to switch over to PicTime because all of your automated, especially like albums and things, like all of that stuff, all the opportunities to save time, as we were talking about time and priorities and kind of outsourcing things to a degree. I think that's really, really brilliant to strike the right balance between work and just being a human being, right? That, but anyways, going back to the automated emails about like the status report, I'm like, okay, maybe I can work that into their client page where they can be checking that. And every time I hit a milestone, just like, okay, we've reached phase 2 and we're on our way, just to like, I don't always do teasers for my clients. It kind of
Sure.
depends. If I can, I try to, but it doesn't always work out. But I'm like, that at least would give, it's almost like the shipping indicator when you order something in the mail.
You're obsessively checking that thing. And you're like,
Yeah.
you want that.
It's all that type of idea. I think that there's a lot to be said there about doing stuff for your clients.
QuickTime I love their app implementation, just the concept of an app, because it allows them to release a ton of different ideas from a lot of different photographers' preferences, and then you can sign up for PickTime and pick and choose which ones make sense instead of being locked into, this is the PickTime way, this is the SmugMug way, which is awful, by the way. And
yes, it is.
This is whatever other brand name, like the app thing. Although I think they could have used a better name than apps, maybe like automations or something. I don't know. Apps kind of make it confusing until you're in there and setting it up. Then you're like, oh, I get this. I get what they're going for here. It's really smart, but I do think there's still a lot of room for improvement in with those kinds of services. It's just a bear once you've got something deployed and working good enough to correct course or do something that doesn't require a ground up, reprogramming and thought process. It's tough, but the app stuff, gets you pretty close. And just let me just outline it, just because I haven't talked about it in a while. I think really, since
go for it.
For anybody who hasn't heard of it or tried it. PickTime lets you assign apps, automations. They've gone through a couple different terms for it that, like, you can say, okay, attached to this genre of gallery or this exact collection of galleries that you hand pick or whatever, assign to a gallery a series of actions that get applied. So I just yesterday launched a bunch of holiday promotional apps, or one app assigned to all my galleries that has a predetermined workflow of an email goes out on this date with this % off, then another email follows up like a couple weeks later. And at the same time, that ad is populated in different areas of the actual gallery of images. And all of this works in concert with one another in a way that all I have to do is click enable. And then you can get in there and modify the amounts or the language if you want it to really be in your voicing, but they've got it all pretty well streamlined. One of the apps that I made was this process what is the official title? It's called Gallery to Backup System app or something. It's the worst name ever. I need to rename it. But when you're ready, when you have the wedding shot and photographed, and you have maybe an image to work as like a cover photo, you can enable the app, attach an image or whatever, and then it automates a series of milestone kind of update apps that says, hey, your images are backed up and imported, ready for safe. There's good for safekeeping and going to be starting editing soon. And then it sets a phase 2 milestone 2 weeks later or something that says 50% done editing, get excited, blah, blah, blah. And it just keeps people in the loop during this lull in conversation that most photographers have between them and their clients until it's finally the day before delivery. It says it's ready for uploading or it's being uploaded. You'll get an official delivery email. And so, it just keeps people in the loop, gets them excited, gets them honestly familiar with the process of going to the gallery. Because so many clients just simply forget. They download everything as a zip file and they never come back. And they forget how to get access to that original space that you gave them their photos in. I honestly wish there was an app to time delay the zip file download for a month, so people were forced to come back to the exact online gallery, and they could download individuals if they wanted, but almost like a preset. I hate to use the word lie, but a big button that says download zip file here, but it takes 2 weeks to prepare it or render it. So that people are just forced to create the habit and the familiarity with going back to their gallery. Because that really is the best place to experience most wedding photos, I think, rather than just dumping them in a folder on your computer and looking at them 800 at a time. I don't know. Anyway, so just for anybody who's interested, PickTime has solved an interesting problem in a way that can be a little overwhelming, but if you just put in a little bit of research, you realize it does way more than you could ever do if you try to create these systems from scratch on your own. So,
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Reading about those different things on your Patreon, I think were interesting to me to really recognize how many opportunities I have that I'm leaving money on the table. And I kind of, I've taken on a different philosophy now in my business where like before I was like, yeah, I don't want to like try to squeeze every penny out of a client. Like I don't want it to feel like slimy or like kind of gross. Yeah. But then when I actually, you make an album sale and you make $500 or $800, you're like, whoa, that felt nice. Like that was awesome. Let's do that again. Yeah. And so even for me, like for years, I've been thinking like print sales are dead, man. And to hear even Sam, just like how much you just occasionally you'll sell prints. And like, I'm like, that's kind of insane to me, but also really awesome that I just got finished running an album sale. And again, I haven't made the switch over to PickTime where I'm curious to see kind of how their automated album
It's a totally different world from SmugMug. Have you done campaigns? Does SmugMug even do they have coupon codes or something? Like, I don't know what.
They do. I've done it all. I've done some stuff, but done it very manually. Done it just like, okay, yeah. I understand the philosophy behind automating these things. But again, because I kind of operate with a small enough client base that is not too impractical yet. And it was also just kind of the time of the year that I'm like, okay, I want to make the switch to PickTime, at least start moving over there. But I'm like, this time of year, the amount of time it'll take me, I'm going to run out of time to make album sales and this and that. But anyways, it worked out like when I did start finally, even this year was a good reminder, like you sell a couple of albums and you're like, it doesn't feel like I'm not expecting anyone to buy an album from me or pushing it on anyone. But occasionally you realize, wow, this client kind of has more money that they want to spend. And when you can kind of make it something that they're benefiting you in some small way as well, like it's certainly not the one and only reason someone will buy one of your albums. Obviously, a lot of that comes down to how you market it, but why to me, why would you not at least just make it an option? No one has to buy anything from you, and they may never, but at least the option is there if they would like it. That
I also, we've talked about, this has come up a few times, leaving money on the table. I think that's a really healthy thing. If you have the sense that you aren't exploiting your clients or maximizing every dollar out of them, but you know where you could if you wanted to, that's a really good place to be from a business perspective, because when you are in a downward cycle, just purely because of chance, maybe you just had a bad year of bookings, or because of something like what we're living through now, whatever the reason, you're going to have those down years. If you know those options are available to you to start squeezing a little bit more revenue out of places where you hadn't previously taken advantage, that's good, healthy headroom to have in your building or business when you need it, when the time comes. It's like, now I can pull the trigger on pushing those album sales or those print sales really a lot more efficiently, versus from day one in your business being obsessed with squeezing every dime out and running a perfectly optimized machine. Rarely, unless you've done an exceptional job saving and having like a rainy day fund or what have you, rarely is there going to be any place left to grow. Like, it's great to feel like you are leaving, I think, money on the table for that exact reason. You have a buffer if you absolutely need to kind of pivot and start taking advantage. That's my, or if you're just simply bored and you're just like, everything's running so well, I might as well do this. I have no other way to make money, whatever. I mean, yeah. So it's, I love that the Little League kind of quote or whatever you keep pulling back from, what's his name? Aaron Draplin?
Aaron Draplin, yeah.
I feel like the idea should be like being, what was it, the best in the little leagues, but having the capability or the talent to play in the majors, if you wanted, or if you got the call. Like, that's great. But you want to be kind of right under the radar at all times. Never. The other thing is, it's just really tough to have any other place to go when you're completely at the top of everything you're doing. So
that's actually... now I'm just curious to know. So within the photography community, I don't think it's uncommon to say that you are a well-known personality, at least on some level in the sphere. Do your clients know that when they hire you? Like,
no,
oh wow, Sam.
Definitely not.
No.
Some might, some do, but the vast majority do not. I mean, I get a lot of clients that are photographers themselves and followed me for years, and they're finally getting married and they ask me, that's awesome, but that's definitely the exception. Maybe a quarter of my clients would fall into that category. The rest, yeah, they're just local people that found me through Google, found me through previous word of mouth from another client. They have no idea. In fact, I kind of don't want them to, because the larger my footprint on social media, I think the more pushback I'm going to start to get with people just simply being uncomfortable with having like thousands of likes on a photo of theirs from their wedding. It's like, ooh,
Yeah,
if you got, bring that to 10 years down the line, if I continue to experience the same growth, I have hundreds of thousands of followers with tens of thousands of likes on every post. That can be exciting, maybe for those photography clients that hire me, because it kind of loops back to their business a little bit. But because the vast majority of my clients are just normal people, I kind of want to hit the nuke button and start all over from scratch and just have this cycle every 10 years of a new business being built. That's sort of maybe the smarter move than constant growth, because especially being in the DC area, I've had clients from my first year of shooting that, not just because of the internet, but their job, working for the government or whatever, they have sensitive jobs and don't want to be out there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've had a couple of like within my contract, it's clear like I kind of have the authority to share whatever I want from their wedding, yada yada. Yeah. But I've had some clients that just before signing the contract were kind of like, hey, I work at a school board and I don't want pictures of me drinking at my reception on your blog or on your social media. Like, can we just amend this to cover that? And it's it's always fascinating to me when that comes up, usually about one a year. I think there was 2 this past year, but that would be an interesting thing, I think, specifically to where you work, just so close to Washington, DC, that you'd have a lot of, you would definitely rub shoulders with lots of government officials in different levels, right?
Yes. And if not as my clients, then oftentimes, almost every wedding, there's a guest who's in attendance that, does have a sensitive job for whatever reason. I shot a wedding. I didn't even know who he was. I knew his name, but I didn't know what he looked like. John Podesta, who's at like the center of all these weird conspiracy theories, like QAnon groups and all this crazy conspiracy theory stuff. But he's like at the center of all these. He was a White House chief of staff for Bill Clinton, all this. And I finished shooting, and Nathan was like, somebody said the name John Podesta at the wedding. I was like, what? And he was just there with his wife. We got pictures of them like dancing with everybody else, but he's like a big deal, huge deal, and at the center of a lot of controversy, for better or for worse, for right or for wrong. Like, and I was like, oh, well, I'm shocked the client didn't say like, can you not share any photos of certain people, whatever. It's I think it's a problem that's going to actually start to get a lot worse. And I think right now people don't appreciate just how valuable the marketing of being able to show what you shoot freely, just how valuable that is. Right now I do charge clients extra to basically not buy the copyright, but buy the privacy of the pictures, which feels weird. It seems like people should be able to have that, but if I can't show what I'm actively doing, then I literally don't have a business. I can't get anybody else to hire me eventually. I mean, it's not like an overnight thing that would occur, but for somebody just starting out, it is an immediate thing. They can't start a business if they can't show anything. Like that's almost impossible. So it's really an interesting problem that I fear the internet actually could start to work against us in that way. But,
Right. Yeah. And videography, I come across similar things sometimes where someone will ask like, oh, in one of our films, can we use like this copyrighted song on the radio? And I'm like, hey, because of copyrights and this is how it works.
Do you know how DJs deal with that, by the way? I've always wondered. DJs, are they just freely allowed to play anything that they're getting reimbursed
at a
for?
reception, you mean specifically? Oh, I think so. I don't think anyone is.
I know, but legally,
I don't
by
think
the
DJs
book,
make a lot of money anyways. To go after them, you're probably what a crappy job sticking around till 3 a.m. Of
a lot of heavy equipment.
Of all the jobs that a wedding vendor, like someone in the wedding industry, can have, DJ has got to be the one that I would hate the most. You know who I think has it made though? I have this conspiracy: limo drivers. It's got to be so easy. They show up like 45 minutes early at the bride's house. everyone hops in the limo, they drive to the venue, and then they'll take you to like a photo spot.
Why are they the ones that always get it something wrong? I feel like if anything goes wrong, it's with the transportation. Wrong address. They don't circle back to go a second time. But they also never own the company, do they? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, almost never. Usually they're just a hired driver, right?
Yeah.
But like the number of times, I'm not even joking, the number of times I've had like a limo driver, just like he's dropped us off for photos. He's just hanging out in the parking lot, like chain smoking. Yeah. He's like, hey, are we like going soon? Yeah. And I'm like, man,
Candy Crush.
You don't have to do anything. Exactly. I'm working.
Exactly.
Like, why are you in a rush? And oh man, there's been a couple of times. So specifically when my wife Leanne and I are shooting together, in the morning we split up where I'll cover the guys, she'll cover the girls, and then usually we only drive one vehicle on the day. Usually it's me, so then usually she's the one that's hopping in the limo or the party bus and getting transported around. And like limo, on top of everything we just complained about limo drivers, they also like they're either like elderly and drive so slow, or usually sure. They are just psychotic, like breakneck running lights, whipping you around. Like, oh man, I'm like, I feel like this is a simple job. I don't know how it just seems to attract some of the least concerned people ever.
Yeah, I don't know either. I just imagine the person with the actual butt in the seat on the day, it doesn't have incentive to care. They're not being reimbursed. But you're right. It is generally, of all the responsibilities, pretty straightforward. It's laid out. But it does tend to go wrong. I tell all my clients, if you listen to anything that I say, even if you don't hire me, please be on top of, be very clear and almost obsessive about what's going on with your transportation, because whoever you're talking to at the company is usually not the person with their butt in the seat.
Oh, yeah.
And there's almost always a miscommunication if you have to go back a couple times or there's a couple different locations, what have you. But the actual job itself, you're just driving a car. It's super easy. And people tip you probably quite well, especially if you do a send-off and you've had some you just finished your wedding day and the last person to see you is the person driving you. Like, you're probably slipping them a pretty awesome tip. I would if it was my wedding. So anyway, it's of all the responsibilities.
That's good to know. I'll try to get into the limo business by the time you get married and collect my tip.
That's amazing. One of the couples this year did something fantastic. I just absolutely loved it, and I really need to blog about it or do something to nudge clients. Just plant the seed of the idea. They rented a classic car, really nice Porsche, and drove that to the next the shooting location and then the ultimate reception area. And that car was so fun for them to drive themselves. It was cool to take pictures with. They wanted to take more time in going to other locations and like maximize the time as well. It wasn't just like, okay, we got to do this. Let's rush. It was like part of it was just enjoying the luxuriously beautiful sports car. I thought that was just beautiful. And of course I've seen other couples like be chauffeured in like really nice old classic chauffeur cars, Rolls Royces and such, but getting your own car that you drive yourself.
You know what the killer is about those Rolls Royces though, or like anything like earlier than the 60s is they don't have AC. So so many brides I've seen hop out of the car when they get just before the ceremony, face is beat red, hair,
and they're
like especially because they're
miserable.
They're
like this is horrible.
They're like, we either opened the windows and ruined my hair or we kept the windows up and just boiled. So if you're a bride or groom listening to this right now, be aware of air conditioning in your car.
Yes.
And that's a joke.
You're
definitely.
So correct on that. Anyway, well, I really appreciate this. I want to leave some headroom. Again, talking about leaving opportunity on the table. We can have another talk at some point. I feel like we can keep going.
Sounds great, man.
You were worried. I can't remember if it was before we started recording. You were worried, like an hour and a half. How are we going to do that? But we're right at like 1:24 right now. So I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to push you.
This has been super smooth. No, it's.
Can I ask
anytime.
What camera are you using for your webcam?
Oh, it's one you've written off. I'm just kidding. You haven't written it. It's a Z6. And
yeah, I
so
have
a Nikon Z6. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
A Nikon Z6. And I've got the FTZ adapter, and this is a Sigma 24, the art series.
Yeah.
It's going to die any minute now.
Okay.
I'm sure of it.
Good.
I don't.
Good
but
to stop
that, yeah, it's not, I'm in manual focus. I've done the autofocus, but it relies on the motor in the lens, and so it's just so loud when you use autofocus with video that I've got this just with the USB-C cable just plugged in, and because of Nikon's utility webcam thing, there's like limitations. I'm sure the audio and video sync is a little bit off.
So Nikon
did
put out a software utility. Canon also did that. I haven't even played with it yet.
So I've literally just got a USB-C cable right now. I have, like, again, I was saying, I think just before we started the stream, that I've been helping my church with their live stream. So we have a lot of the like HDMI to USB dongles and things. So all of those work really great if you're pulling out of an HDMI port. But other than that, the Z6, the thing that killed me the most about, I shot a D750 as my main body for years, was controlling the white balance. So you can control, like, you could go to the different modes, but you couldn't control your tint. And that always just killed me. I felt like, in video on anything.
What?
I felt like, I don't know, maybe I've just never figured out how to use it. But with the Z6, your white balance customization is so much better. So for when I'm doing video, it's so much.
Did they
so
also?
much
is that one that they updated to support RAW footage recording? Didn't they?
Yeah. So I have. Okay. You need an Atomos Ninja recorder. So I have that actually. And so I shot a wedding day using it a month ago, actually. And I just shot an N-Log. So N-Log is like, obviously, like your step down from RAW. Because, man, I don't got the hard drive space to deal with RAW.
And then you have to like render everything as optimized, I would assume, to even,
But I found that using the recorder, it's like good in much more controlled environments. But for a run and gun situation, I had 4 batteries for it, like the massive Sony L ones. But I'm like, that thing just eats batteries more than I'm used to. That after shooting that one wedding, I'm like, the footage was really nice to grade it, and it's really easy for Premiere to edit it and so on. But after that, I'm like, my clients, I don't think would ever really notice the difference between just like recording internally or using shooting an N-Log and grading it and this and that. So I'm like, you know what? I don't think I get paid enough to care that much anymore. That I'll just do a really good job, especially because things like white balance, that gets baked into your file when you're not shooting with an external recorder. Because I can dial that in a lot better, I'm just like, okay, just be more cautious on the wedding day. Slow down. That's my big thing. It's just like, okay, Aidan, slow down, man. Slow down. It's okay. No need to rush.
That's a good mindset to keep right at the surface. It's hard to do. It's hard to practice.
I'm a bit of a stress ball, and my wife is just so chill about everything. So we balance each other out nicely that way, that she's always trying to like pass on her zen to me, to just be like, it's okay, relax. You'll think of something. It'll be okay.
That's sweet.
And she's right, as she always is. But
Cool. All right, man. Well, appreciate it. Do you want to just plug your, Instagram or website or something for anybody?
My website is probably more interesting than my Instagram. So it's just hushhushphotofilm.com, not hushhush photofilm. If you go
hush,
there,
one of the cool, nice.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah. Oh, one of the what? You're about to say something.
The video just died. Is your video still on?
Yeah, we're good. I can hear you.
Okay.
No. Can you hear me?
My bad. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Strange
I don't know
way
what
to
happened
go out.
there.
That's okay.
Anywho.
I feel like you're about to say something related to your website. But.
I was just going to say, if any other fellow photographers, the most interesting thing probably to you on my website is that I made an entire course about teaching brides and grooms how to plan the layout of their wedding day. So it's called the Wedding Day Timeline course. Cool. You can buy it if you want, but I'll just send you the link if you message me. But that, do that for your clients. They really like it, and it's very helpful. And it cuts down on the back and forth emails you have to send. So,
absolutely.
Anywho.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks. All right. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. Have a good day.
Yeah, this again. Yeah. Take care, man.
Bye.